What's going on? Why is it losing all this value?
Well, there are two main factors that drive the rand. Number one, we look at global factors and we also look at domestic factors. And a combination of those two is not favorable at the moment. When you look at global factors, for instance, there is a big concern at the moment about what the U.S. Federal Reserve is going to be doing or likely to be doing over the next few months. We know that, since about 2007, 2008, they've just been pumping money into the U.S. economy to revive that economy, the so-called quantitative easing. Yeah. And this money sort of has spread to the rest of the world, particularly emerging markets, including South Africa. And this flood of U.S. liquidity has sort of boosted these currencies over that period. But what we've seen lately, or what we're hearing, is that the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is the central bank in the U.S., is going to start cutting back on its injection of liquidity. So they're starting to prepare for the withdrawal of that money out of the U.S. economy and therefore the world economy. And that is having a negative impact on emerging market currencies generally, not only South Africa. I mean, Turkey, India facing the same troubles. Yeah. And when you look at South Africa and also countries like Turkey too, domestic conditions or factors are not very favorable. Yeah. If I have to talk South Africa, we growth, we're very concerned about the labor relations environment. When you look at, for instance, the mining sector, the ongoing negotiations are not very promising. I know that the gold sector cannot sort of reach an agreement now because of the very wide difference between what the Chamber of Mines is offering and what the unions are demanding. Yeah. So if we're going to see strikes in the manufacturing, the manufacturing sector, we know NUMSA, sort of in the automotive sector has already started. If you're going to see strikes spread into the mining sector, those are the two major exporters in South Africa. It's not going to be positive.
No, I mean, we see motor manufacturers grinding to a halt at the moment. I mean, there's some manufacturers that are not getting anything. I mean, we've got the currencies on the screen at the moment. 10.16 to the dollar, 15.93 to the pound. I mean, that's just horrific. 13.64 against the euro. Just having a look at the dollar against the pound, the dollar against the rand, I beg your pardon. We've lost 17% in value this year alone. That's a frightening amount. I know it's global, but would you say that domestically it's weighing even more on our currency? How are we performing as the rest of the world? I mean, you talk about other emerging markets, but where do we stand in terms of if we have to look at a table of where currencies are doing in the world?
Yeah, I mean, the rand in financial markets, it's labeled a high beta currency, which simply means that it's very volatile compared to other similar currencies. I mean, historically, we've seen this happening. 2001, we saw that happening. Every time there is some fear or a bad news story about politics or anything in South Africa, we see the rand taking a big knock. So it's quite volatile. When this happens, when these factors are unfavorable, you see the rand falling very sharply. But when things improve, again, the rand will sort of strengthen very quickly. But we're not doing very well at the moment, and the impact on the domestic economy is not really good. We've got this ongoing or continuous negative cycle of, things becoming bad in the domestic economy, that impacting on the rand and sort of making matters worse, and it just goes on and on. It's this vicious cycle.
Yeah. Just quickly, and before I let you go, should the Reserve Bank intervene? I mean, we're looking at, I'll just take one example, the petrol price. It's getting ridiculous, and this is falling on the back of this increasing rand-dollar exchange rate and everything else.
Well, it's a question of, how much power does the Reserve Bank, the South African Reserve Bank, have to intervene in the rand? I mean, ways of intervening or influencing the direction of interest rates is, for instance, being active in the market and maybe buying dollars to support the rand. But when you look at our foreign currency holdings, they are not enough to really drive the rand significantly. The rand the rand is a very liquid currency. Like in international markets, it's traded, and the Reserve Bank, if the Reserve Bank, for instance, had to really take an active stance in markets, we could lose a lot because, traders sitting in London, traders sitting in New York would really, for instance, try to take advantage of that.
All right. Isaac, thank you so very much for talking to us here on Morning Live. Yeah. Isaac Matshego is an economist with Nedbank talking to us about that currency. But then again, if you're an exporter, I suppose you're smiling with the currencies at this rate. That's Rob Davies also making comments like that, saying it is good for the exporters to sit at this level.